Namaste, aloha. My name is Janapati Das, and we are going to continue reading the Krishna book, translated and purported upon by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Please accept my respects, and let me offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual guru and to my spiritual grandfather A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who very kindly translated and purported upon this Krishna book that we've been reading. And we are going to continue. We have been reading about the description of autumn in Vrindavan. And so we're going to continue with that. But first, let's chant a little bit. Namo Vishnu Vapraya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Siraswarupananda Paramahamsa Bhaktinamine Bhajashi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, if we remember from the last class, we had begun to read the descriptions of autumn. And it's a very, very wonderful chapter utilizing the descriptions of autumn in India, descriptions of autumn in Vrindavan, as an analogy for different spiritual wisdom, spiritual truths. So we're just going to continue on with some of those things. During the rainy season, in the evening, there are many glowworms visible about the tops of trees, hither and thither, and they glitter just like lights. But the luminaries of the sky, the stars and the moons are not visible. Similarly, in the age of Kali, persons who are atheists or miscreants become very prominently visible, whereas persons who are actually following the Vedic principles for spiritual emancipation are practically obscured. This is so true. The atheistic, there's a large increase of people leaving religion, becoming atheists and philosophers and whatnot, materialists. And it's actually anybody who's in any kind of religious or spiritual path is actually looked down upon. It's not considered advanced. It's considered like something that's mythology and science is the new religion. Although if you say that to scientists, they get mad. Atheists, they're like, science is not a religion. But it is, because it's a highly speculative and oftentimes contradictory religion. People follow it and adhere to it in a way that is very much like religion. So they believe in things, even though they often end their conversation, well, we don't really know these things, but we will know them in the future, or it could be this and it might be that. This person said this and this person said that, and no two scientists can actually agree on exactly the same thing. So, but yet this is the day and age of the science, right? But science comes from scienze, actually a lot of different words out of old Europe and Latin, scienze, which means knowledge or truth, to know something. And it's not just to speculate about something. Science is not about speculating. It could be about learning stuff, but it's not about speculating and about guessing. So a system that's based on observation and measurement, there are things you can't measure and you can't observe, but yet people accept it as true. You can't measure and you can't observe, and there's no actual proof of evolution, but yet it's an accepted fact in the scientific community. And if you say any otherwise, or if you say, oh, the universe actually had some, even if something like intelligent design, something abstract is that, you're ostracized from the community of the scientific as being, pseudo scientists. But real science is like the science of identity, the science of bhakti yoga, finding the truth of your identity is actually based in cold facts, the Vedic knowledge handed down through disciplic lineage since time immemorial from the Supreme Lord. Excuse me. And so, but that's what's become the day and age of this day and age of Kali Yuga. It's sort of like, you tell people, well, God is a fact, and these things you tell them about bhakti yoga, and they're like, oh, can you prove the soul? Can you prove, can you? I was like, can you actually prove that there are atoms in your body? Have you ever seen an atom? Have you ever seen a a quark or whatever, a subatomic particle. Have you seen these things? You accept them as true. Is the planet Saturn a real planet? Have you actually ever seen it? And how do you know that these people aren't deceiving you? That's the same argument that they use against people who are religious. Well, how do you know that's true? You show them the Vedic knowledge and they're like, oh, but just prove it. And it's, it's funny because it's a contradictory system of, they always fall back on prove it, but the system itself is flawed because the modern scientific theory and modern scientific thought is based on utilizing your mind and your senses. And we already know from our classes and about the mind and the senses, they're limited and they're also extremely faulty. In other words, we make mistakes all the time. We're subject to illusion. We're subject to cheat. There's so many things that go on with our mind that it's not even true. We have a dream, we think it's real at the time, but it's actually not real. It's just something in our brain. So, but I guess that was sort of my side shift there. But that's, this day and age, when you try to talk about spiritual knowledge or the very extremely profound and deep knowledge of the Vedic culture, Bhakti Yoga, is just in the yogic scriptures, it's just infinitely deep, and it just keeps going and going. But actually, people who are envious of Krishna can't have any access into these scriptures, so they don't really understand it when you try to explain it to them, because they're envious and they don't really want to know because they think they already do know. So anyway, continuing on. Persons who are atheists or miscreants become very prominently visible, whereas persons who are actually following the Vedic principles for spiritual emancipation are practically obscured. This age, Kali Yuga, is compared to the cloudy season of the living entities. In this age, real knowledge is covered by the influence of material advancement of civilization. The cheap mental speculators, atheists, and manufacturers of so-called religious principles become prominent like the glowworms, whereas persons strictly following the Vedic principles or scriptural injunctions become covered by the clouds of this age. So even in religious thought, and this is also kind of one of the problems, even in a lot of times in religious thought, it's so much influenced by the material energy. In other words, the material desire. So you have some people twisting the words of Jesus around and saying that Jesus said you should love yourself or you should love your neighbor is the greatest commandment, not love God and then love your neighbor. They get so many ideas like, oh, God said that, said in the Bible it's good to try to make money and have material good things, and God created the earth for our enjoyment. It's all kinds of nonsense. So these kinds of ideas, even in religious thought, they're just hypocritical and wrong. So oftentimes, even when an atheist points to religion, they're kind of right, because they, a lot of what has gone on in the name of religion is horrible. It's not even really true religion. It's just some kind of twisted power play many times in all kinds of different religions. People should learn to take advantage of the actual luminaries of the sky, the sun, moon, and stars, instead of the glowworm's light. Actually, the glowworm cannot give any light in the darkness of night. This is a really nice analogy because, when you start to kind of look at the so-called knowledge of material knowledge, it's very superficial. It's not very deep. It doesn't have much wisdom, and it doesn't really answer or give any kind of real clarification about the meaning of life. Whereas if you studied the Vedic scriptures like the Krishna book, the Bhagavad Gita, even studying things like the Bible and whatnot, it has a much deeper, profound um, meaning. Sorry, I'm really coughing today. Let me drink a little water. Actually, the glowworm cannot give any light in the darkness of night. So when it comes down to it, like once death comes about, all these things, understanding like the difference between this moth of Bolivia and the snake of Mongolia or Inner Mongolia, and how they're mating, whatever material knowledge you can think of, how does that really solve the problems of life and death? It doesn't. It's just superficial. As clouds sometimes clear even in the rainy season, sometimes the moon, stars, and sun become visible. So even in this Kali Yuga, there are sometimes advantages. The Vedic movement of Lord Chaitanya's, the distribution of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, is heard in this way. People seriously anxious to find real life should take advantage of this movement instead of looking toward the light of mental speculators and the atheists. And it's so true. It's in Lord Chaitanya's process of hearing and chanting Krishna's names as the way of self-realization in this age is so easy and so much fun and so beneficial that to take to anything else is like eating dog vomit or something. I think Jesus said something like that, returning back to the material. Oh no, that's a little bit different, but it's a similar thing, He said that a person who comes to spiritual life and then returns back to material life is like the dog returning to his vomit. So it's very much like that. Everything that's in this material world, in of itself, for your own pleasure, is really like dog vomit. But we can utilize so much around us in the service of Krishna because it does belong to Krishna already. And so he's so very kindly given us this ability to offer the things, use our body in the service of Krishna in different ways, to grow vegetables or whatever and offer the vegetables, and or go to the store and buy them. You can or you go and you make money and you use all that money you're making in the service of Krishna. So there's all this material energy that when you do offer it to Krishna, it immediately becomes spiritualized and benefited, and in so many wonderful ways that you can't even see. That not even yourself, some people even indirectly become benefited by being able to utilize these things for Krishna. After the first rainfall, when there is a thundering sound in the clouds, all the frogs begin to croak like students suddenly engaged in reading their studies. Students are generally supposed to rise early in the morning, but they do not usually arise of their own accord, however, but only when there is a bell sounded in the temple or in the cultural institution. By the order of the spiritual master, they immediately rise, and after finishing their morning duties, they sit down to study the Vedas or chant Vedic mantras. Everyone is sleeping in the darkness of Kali Yuga, but when there is a great acharya, by his calling only, everyone takes to the study of the Vedas to acquire actual knowledge. During the rainy season, many small ponds, lakes, and rivulets become filled with water. Otherwise, the rest of the year they remain dry. Similarly, materialistic persons are dry, but sometimes when they are in a so-called opulent position with a home or children or a little bank balance, they appear to be flourishing, but immediately afterwards they become dry again, like the small rivulets and ponds. The poet Vijayapati said that in the society of friends, family, children, wife, etc., there is certainly some pleasure, but that pleasure is compared to a drop of water in the desert. I've heard this from my spiritual master a lot too, that material life is like the desert. And yes, you find water in the sometimes some little bit of water on a cactus or whatever, it's like you get a little bit of pleasure, and everything looks enticing. He was using the analogy of like people see all these things in the sands, like very, either mirages that look like water or are very beautiful sand, and these are likened to the things that people think that are gonna bring them attraction. Oh, look at that pretty sand, it's purple, but it's just sand. You eat it and it's just like, it's just, it seemingly has this pleasure to it in your mind that it's gonna bring you some pleasure. And maybe it will bring just a little bit of water, but then you're really actually just burning. You're wandering around in the desert, going from one place to another, trying to squeeze out any kind of little bit of water or pleasure. And you're like, oh, this damn, then you get frustrated. And you refer to, the damn sand, I'm burning, oh my God, I'm burning up. And people are just like, life sucks. And then someone comes along, a devotee, and they're like, what's wrong? And the sand, I'm burning up in the sand. And he's like, well, you see the sign, there's an oasis right this way, It's like the devotee's like, you can come to the chanting, and he's like, but the sand, and I need to, and he's like, the guy's like, oh, this guy's crazy. He's like, the oasis is right this way. And I've been in the Sahara Desert before, and it's literally like that. It's like hundreds of miles of sand dunes. When I was in Mauritania, I just was on a camel for like hours and hours and hours over these sand dunes, like oceans of sand dunes. And then in the middle, out of the middle of nowhere, there's this oasis, and it's very lush, just a small little section, because there's some water right there. And, spiritual life is like that. You can live off the date. We're eating dates, but everything around us is all dry, Everyone is hankering after happiness, just as in the desert, everyone is hankering after water. If in the desert there is a drop of water, the water is there, of course, but the benefit from that drop of water is very insignificant. In our materialistic way of life, we are hankering after an ocean of happiness. But in the form of society, friends, and mundane love, we are getting no more than a drop of water. Our satisfaction is never achieved, as the small rivulets, lakes, and ponds are never filled with water in the dry season. This is so true because of our nature of being eternal and full of happy and blissful in our spiritual nature, but completely illusioned in the material world and encased in this body, trying to find our pleasure externally through our senses. We really need the ocean of happiness. We need to be connected to that ocean, and that ocean is Krishna. That's our eternal relationship that we have with Krishna, and we've given it up just so we could let me see if I can find a little that girl looks beautiful, and it's just like maybe 5 years, get sick of her, 10 years, and she gets fat, you get fat, you're like fighting with each other, and then you're like, oh my God, this is horrible, or you get a car, and it's like, maybe it's a cool car, but then it's like you have to get it fixed or whatever, and then it's just like not even really exciting anymore, or somebody crashes into the car. It's just always so many things that we think are going to bring us some pleasure, some happiness, and maybe we get a little bit of like, oh, that's great, ooh, that's really neat, and then it's like, like drag. It's a drag. It's kind of like what I tell younger people. It's like, I've done everything in the material world, everything you can imagine, and it's like, it is like that, suck that little bit of juice out of there, but most of it is like misery. And then the younger people I know, like my children, and they're just like, oh, wow, cool, it's like whatever, and you're just like, okay, that's just that little bit of water in there, with the thorns, or that's another analogy I just thought of right now. My spiritual master likened to like the camels who chew thorns, they chew thorns, and they think it's so delicious, but what they're really tasting is their own blood, because the thorns are cutting the inside of their mouth. Due to rainfall, the grass, trees, and vegetation look very green. Sometimes the grass is covered by a certain kind of red insect, and when the green and red combine with umbrella-like mushrooms, the entire scene changes, just like a person who has suddenly become rich. The farmer then becomes very happy to see his field full of grains, but the capitalists, who are always unaware of the activities of a supernatural power, become unhappy because they are afraid of a competitive price. In some places, certain capitalists in government restrict the farmer from producing too much grains, not knowing the actual fact that all food grains are supplied by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to the Vedic injunction, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead maintains this creation. Therefore, he arranged for a supply of whatever is required for all living entities. That's why it says in the Sri Upanishad that everything animate and inanimate is owned and controlled by the Supreme Lord, and that we should understand what has been allotted to us. And we have been allotted something. Some people have been allotted with a lot of things because of karma. They may be rich, they may be beautiful, they may be intelligent. Some people may have less. They may be existing in a very poor or impoverished state. But it doesn't really matter, because it's just like that situation with the pawns. You have something now, it won't be. You don't always have it. The prince today will be the pauper in the next life. So there's nothing really worthy to just like get excited, like either I have a lot of money, or I don't have money, I wish I had money, and realizing that whether you have money or you don't have money, or whether you have a good karma or you have bad karma that's paying off, if you dovetail your life in the service of Krishna, if you're rich, you use those things in the service of Krishna. If you're poor, you just utilize whatever you have in the service of Krishna. It's all about your consciousness. That's what's the meaning of life. That's what you're supposed to be doing. So, because all things are owned and controlled by God. You may be very proud about the things that you have, the nice houses or whatever, but those are all temporarily in your possession, but maybe not for very long. You don't really know, and eventually at death you have to give it up, or your kids are fighting over it or whatever. When there is a population increase, it is the business of the Supreme Lord to feed them. But persons who are atheists or miscreants do not like abundant production of food grains, especially if their business might be hampered. During the rainy season, all living entities in the land, sky, and water become very refreshed, exactly like one who engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. We have practical experience of this with our students in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Before becoming students, they were dirty looking. But due to having no information of Krishna consciousness, they appeared very dirty. Although they had very naturally beautiful personal features, but due to having no information of Krishna consciousness, they appeared very dirty and wretched. There was a really nice thing that I read from another book by Bhaktivedanta Swami today. It was the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and it was just basically saying that when a person develops more and more their love of God, of Godhead, their heart becomes more and more lovely, like the sunshine. I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly, but it's like the love of Godhead, like a sun. The sunshine makes the heart become more and more lovely. And, this is really true. Sometimes when you see somebody, they may be physically very beautiful, just such very beautiful, very attractive, pretty, but they just may be very dark inside. And you're like, that person is attractive, but there's something about them that makes them very ugly. And then you see someone who's maybe physically not so attractive, but their heart is very beautiful. And you're just like, wow, you're very attracted to that person. So that's what is pretty much said here, and even more so, the person who chants in Krishna's names, they're just, you can see right through. You can see how, for one thing, there's a lot of rules about, when you're practicing bhakti yoga, to try to live a clean life. We eat vegetarian. We try to, we take a bath every day. We do neti, and we take care of our health, and we take care of making sure our body is fit. We eat well and eat healthy and don't eat junk. But similarly, we chant every day and we practice what we've been learning from our spiritual master, and that enables us that shows that loveliness coming from your heart. You can see people are like very attracted to people, but it's not really, they're like, wow, I don't know what it is about that person, because everything we've learned, we're experiencing in our heart, and it shows through the humility, the kindness, the love, the well-wishing of every living entity, and not feeling enviousness or any kind of offense from what people say about you. That's a very attractive thing to have. People are very attracted to that. When they are dressed with saffron-colored cloth and tilak on their foreheads and beads in their hands and on their necks, they look exactly as if they come directly from Vaikuntha. In the rainy season, when the rivers swell and rush to the oceans and seas, they appear to agitate the ocean. Similarly, if a person who is engaged in the yoga mystic process is not very advanced in spiritual life, he can become agitated by the sex impulse. High mountains, however, although splashed by torrents of rain, do not change. So a person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness, even if put into difficulties, is not embarrassed, because a person who is spiritually advanced accepts any adverse condition of life as the mercy of the Lord, and thus he is completely eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom. Okay. Yeah. So this is going to go on for some more. So we'll probably have to make a couple of videos for that. But it's a of course the bottom line is that in our dedication, in our practice, which is our practice, our sadhana bhakti, our practice of bhakti yoga, we have a lot of attachments. We have a lot of things that we're working through. We're all in different spiritual places. We should never really pretend that we are somewhere more spiritually advanced than other people. But we practice and we cultivate and we listen. We do our japa. We hear the chanting. We listen to talks, and we contemplate the scriptures like the Krishna book, and we think, what am I doing in my life? How am I applying these methods in my life? Sincerely and utterly considering this and what we hear from our spiritual master, sincerely and utterly taking those instructions and asking myself, am I doing this? Am I applying this in my life? Or if the spiritual master is making points about the things that are done wrong, what people do wrong, we ask ourselves, is that me? Am I the person who's doing that? Can I rectify that? Every day we should come back to that. We begin again, and we make faults, we have problems, and we fall down, and we don't do a perfect job of what but we just keep coming back. We know that Krishna is utterly and completely, and our spiritual master too has complete love for us and mercy, that they want us to come back. Krishna wants us to come back to him. It's not like, oh, I want to send you to hell. I hope if you don't do it right, I'm sending you to hell. It's like, no, he wants everybody to come back. So this is a very wonderful story. And if we put our faith, we put our trust in Krishna, then everything will be okay. Really, it will. Trust me. Because like I said before, as my spiritual master said, whatever your greatest fear is in life, Krishna is the source of everything, of all things, of all love and power and mercy. And it's not like he can't handle that. If he can pick up Govardhan Hill, which we're going to get into that story a little bit later, with his pinky, not even like exerting any effort, if he can create universes or support and maintain all universes, he can handle any little situation that you're dealing with. So thank you very much. We are going to stop there and chant a little bit more. Haribol. Okay, that's all for tonight. See you next time. Bye, Bill.